I never expected to fall in love with a man who showed up at my door with a toolbox and a smile that could rebuild more than just rotting wood. But that's exactly what happened last summer, and I'm still trying to make sense of how something so simple turned into something so profound. My name is Marcus, and I'm 32 years old. I work from home as a graphic designer, which means I spend most of my days staring at screens in my small rental house on Maple Street. The place isn't much, honestly. It's one of those post-war bungalows that probably looked charming in the 1950s, but now just looks tired. The landlord, Mrs. Chen, is sweet, but she's in her 80s and doesn't have much money for repairs. I don't complain because the rent is reasonable and the neighborhood is quiet, but the front porch had been slowly deteriorating for months, and by June, it was genuinely dangerous. There were boards that would flex under your weight, making these awful groaning sounds that suggested they might give way at any moment. The railing had come loose on one side, wobbling whenever you touched it. I'd stopped sitting out there entirely, which was a shame, because that porch had been my favorite spot. Every evening after work, I used to take my coffee out there and just watch the world go by. The street has these old oak trees that create this beautiful canopy of green, and in the evening light, everything turns golden. It was my moment of peace in an otherwise chaotic world. But with the porch falling apart, I'd lost that ritual. I mentioned it to Mrs. Chen a few times, gently, not wanting to pressure her. She always looked so worried when I brought it up, and I could see her doing mental calculations about money she didn't have. I told her it was fine, that I'd just use the back door, but she seemed genuinely distressed about it. Then one Saturday morning, in early July, I woke up to the sound of someone moving around on my porch. My heart jumped because, someone's on your porch at 8 in the morning. That's alarming. I threw on sweatpants and a t-shirt and went to the front door, ready to confront whoever was out there. When I opened the door, I found a man crouched down examining the floorboards. He was maybe mid-30s with dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and these incredibly focused brown eyes. He wore a faded blue t-shirt that had seen better days and work pants with paint stains. There was a toolbox open beside him and he had a pencil tucked behind his ear. He looked up when he heard the door, and that's when I saw the smile. It was this genuine, warm thing that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made my stomach do something unexpected. "Morning," he said, standing up and wiping his hands on his pants. "You must be Marcus. I'm Daniel. Mrs. Chen asked me to take a look at your porch." I was still processing the fact that someone was actually here to fix it. "She did?" "Yeah, she's friends with my mom. When she mentioned the porch was in rough shape, I offered to come by." He gestured at the boards. "It's worse than I thought, honestly. You're lucky you haven't fallen through." "I stopped using it," I admitted. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of what looked like concern. "That's a shame. Porches are meant to be used. That's their whole purpose." We stood there for a moment, and I became acutely aware that I hadn't brushed my teeth yet, and my hair was probably doing that thing where it sticks up in the back. He didn't seem to notice or care. "So, how much is this going to cost?" I asked, because I needed to know if I could afford whatever Mrs. Chen had agreed to. Daniel shook his head. "Already worked it out with Mrs. Chen. Don't worry about it." "I can't let you work for free," I protested. "I'm not working for free. Mrs. Chen's paying me." He said it in a way that was clearly meant to end the discussion, but something in his tone made me think there was more to it. Over the next week, Daniel showed up every morning around 8. He'd work until early afternoon, measuring and sawing and hammering. I tried to focus on my design work, but I kept finding excuses to check on his progress. I'd bring him water or iced tea, or ask questions about what he was doing. He never seemed annoyed by my interruptions. In fact, he seemed to welcome them. He told me he ran his own carpentry business, mostly doing custom furniture and home renovations. He'd learned the trade from his father, who'd been a contractor. There was something meditative about the way he worked, this careful attention to detail that I found mesmerizing. He didn't rush. Every cut was precise, every nail driven in at exactly the right angle. On the third day, I brought him a sandwich from the deli down the street because I figured he must be getting hungry. He was sitting on the steps, taking a break, and when I handed him the sandwich, his face lit up. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "You're rebuilding my porch. It's the least I can do." He unwrapped the sandwich and took a bite, and we sat there together in comfortable silence. The morning was already getting hot, and there were beads of sweat on his temples. I noticed he had these strong, capable hands, scarred in places from years of work. There was something incredibly attractive about that, about someone who built things with their own hands. "Can I ask you something?" he said after a while. "Sure. Mrs. Chen mentioned you used to sit out here every evening. What did you do? I mean, were you reading or on your phone or what?" It was such a simple question, but something about the way he asked it, like he genuinely wanted to know, made me answer honestly. Mostly I just sat, watched the street, listened to the sounds of the neighborhood. It sounds boring, but it was my favorite part of the day. Everything else is so busy, you know. Work is constant. Everything's always demanding attention. But out here, I could just be. He nodded slowly, like this made perfect sense to him. That's not boring at all. That's what porches are for. They're liminal spaces, between private and public, between work and rest. They're where you're supposed to just exist. The way he said it, so matter-of-fact but also poetic, caught me off guard. "Are you a philosopher, Carpenter?" He laughed, and it was a great laugh, genuine and unself-conscious. My ex-boyfriend used to say I thought too much about furniture. The word boyfriend hung in the air between us. He'd said it so casually, not like it was a test or a revelation, just a fact. I felt something in my chest loosen, something I hadn't even realized was tight. "Is that why he's your ex?" I asked, trying to match his casual tone. "Among other reasons. Mostly we wanted different things. He wanted to move to the city, climb the corporate ladder. I wanted to keep building things with my hands in a small town." He shrugged. "No hard feelings, just incompatible." "I moved here from the city," I offered. 2 years ago. Best decision I ever made." "Yeah? What made you leave?" I thought about how to answer that. It was too much. Too loud, too fast, too expensive, too everything. I felt like I was disappearing into the noise. Here I can actually think. I can hear myself. Daniel looked at me with those warm brown eyes, and I felt seen in a way I hadn't in a long time. "That makes sense," he said simply. After that conversation, something shifted between us. The interactions became longer, more personal. He'd take his breaks, and we'd talk about everything. Books we'd read, places we wanted to travel, embarrassing childhood stories. I learned that he'd grown up in this town, left for a few years to try city life, and come back when he realized he missed the pace of small-town living. He had a sister in Portland and parents who'd retired to Arizona. He loved old movies, especially film noir, and he had a cat named Hitchcock, who apparently ruled his house with an iron paw. I told him about my family, about coming out to my parents when I was 23 and how they'd struggled with it at first but eventually came around. I told him about my work, about the satisfaction of creating something beautiful from nothing, even if it was just pixels on a screen. I told him things I hadn't told anyone in years, and he listened like every word mattered. By the end of the week, the porch was nearly done. He'd replaced all the damaged boards, reinforced the structure, fixed the railing, and even added these subtle decorative touches that made it look intentional rather than just functional. It was beautiful, honestly. Better than it had been even when I first moved in. On Friday afternoon, he was putting the finishing touches on the railing when I came out with 2 beers. It was almost 5, and the golden hour light was starting to filter through the oak trees. "Want to test it out?" he asked, gesturing at the porch. We sat on the steps together, cold beers in hand, and watched the neighborhood. A couple walked by with their dog. Kids rode bikes down the street. Someone was grilling somewhere, and the smell of charcoal and cooking meat drifted through the air. "You were right," Daniel said quietly. "This is nice, just sitting. It's even better now that I'm not worried about falling through." He smiled at that. We sat in silence for a while, and it was the comfortable kind, the kind you can only have with someone you've connected with. "So," I said eventually, trying to sound casual, "what do I owe you?" He turned to look at me, and there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. "Mrs. Chen already paid me." "Come on, Daniel, I know she didn't have much to give you. Let me contribute something." He shook his head. "Honestly, Marcus, I'm good. This was a nice project. Straightforward, satisfying work. Plus," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Plus I got to meet you. That's been worth something." My heart started beating faster. "Yeah? Yeah." He took a sip of his beer, not quite meeting my eyes. "I don't usually talk this much with clients, but you're easy to talk to. I've enjoyed this week." "Me too," I said, and I meant it more than I'd meant anything in a while. We finished our beers as the sun got lower. When he stood to leave, gathering his tools, I felt a sense of panic. This was it. The porch was done. There was no reason for him to come back. "Well," he said, closing his toolbox, "enjoy your porch. I hope you get back to your evening ritual." "Daniel," I said, and he turned back. "Would you want to, if you're not busy tomorrow, maybe we could grab dinner or something?" The smile that spread across his face was answer enough before he even spoke. "I'd really like that." We exchanged numbers, and he left, and I sat back down on my newly repaired porch, feeling like something significant had just happened, though I couldn't quite name what. That night he texted me, "Thanks for the beer and the conversation, and for letting me fix your porch." I stared at that message for a long time before responding. "Thank you for fixing it, and for the conversation. I'm looking forward to tomorrow." "Me too. Pick you up at 7? "Perfect." I couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying every conversation we'd had, analyzing every look, every smile. I'd been single for almost 2 years, since my last relationship had ended badly. I'd moved here partly to escape that, to start fresh. I hadn't been looking for anything, but Daniel had appeared on my porch with his toolbox and his warm smile, and suddenly I was feeling things I'd forgotten I could feel. He picked me up at 7 the next evening in an old pickup truck that suited him perfectly. We went to this Italian place on Main Street, the kind of restaurant that's been family-owned for 3 generations. We talked for hours, barely noticing when the restaurant started to empty out around us. We talked about our dreams, our fears, our past relationships, and what we'd learned from them. He told me about the furniture pieces he was most proud of, and I showed him some of my design work on my phone. We discovered we both loved hiking and had both been meaning to explore the trails in the state park, but never had anyone to go with. When he dropped me off that night, we sat in his truck in front of my house for another hour, neither of us wanting the evening to end. Finally, he walked me to my porch, and we stood there in the soft glow of the porch light he'd installed. "I had a really great time," he said. "Me too." There was a moment, just a brief one, where we stood close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with sawdust, where I could see the flecks of amber in his brown eyes. Then he leaned in and kissed me, soft and tentative, and it felt like coming home. We started seeing each other regularly after that. He'd come over after work and we'd sit on the porch, talking until the mosquitoes drove us inside. We'd go on hikes on weekends, pack sandwiches, and spend whole days in the woods. He introduced me to his friends, and I introduced him to mine. His cat, Hitchcock, decided I was acceptable, which Daniel assured me was a significant endorsement. About a month in, we were sitting on the porch one evening when I brought up something that had been bothering me. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Always." "That first day, when you said Mrs. Chen paid you, did she really?" He was quiet for a moment, and I could see him debating whether to be honest. Finally, he sighed. "She tried to. She offered me $50, which wouldn't have even covered materials. I told her I'd take care of it." "So you did this for free?" "I did it because she's a sweet old lady who was worried about her tenant, and because—" He paused. "Because when I came by to look at it the first time, I saw you through the window. You were working at your desk and the light was hitting you just right, and I thought you were beautiful. And then when I met you, you were kind and interesting, and I wanted a reason to keep coming back." I didn't know what to say to that. My throat felt tight. "I know that's probably weird," he continued, "fixing your porch as an elaborate excuse to spend time with you, but I'm not good at the usual ways of meeting people. Dating apps make me anxious. Bars aren't my scene. When I saw an opportunity to do something I'm actually good at, and maybe get to know you, I took it." "That's not weird," I managed to say. "That's actually the most romantic thing anyone's ever done for me." He looked relieved. "Yeah? Yeah? Though I still want to pay you back for materials, at least. How about you let me take you to dinner next weekend instead? There's this place about an hour from here that does the best steaks you've ever had." "That seems like a bad deal for you. You're out hundreds of dollars and you're buying me dinner too." He reached over and took my hand, threading his fingers through mine. "Marcus, every time I drive up and see you sitting on this porch, knowing I helped make that possible, knowing you're here partly because of something I built, that's payment enough. Watching you enjoy something I created with my hands, that's everything." I understood then what he'd been trying to tell me all along. It wasn't about the money or even really about the porch. It was about creating something, about contributing something meaningful to someone else's life. It was about building a foundation, literally and metaphorically. We've been together for 6 months now. He's slowly been moving his things into my house, though we haven't made it official yet. His clothes are in my closet, his toothbrush is in my bathroom. Hitchcock has claimed the sunny spot by the living room window. It's happening gradually, naturally, like everything with Daniel. Every evening, weather permitting, we sit on the porch together. Sometimes we talk, sometimes we just sit in comfortable silence. Neighbors have started to recognize us as a couple, waving as they walk by. Mrs. Chen came by once and saw us sitting there together, and the knowing smile on her face suggested she'd had suspicions all along about why Daniel had been so eager to take on the project. Last week, Daniel started building a swing for the porch. He didn't ask, just showed up one Saturday morning with wood and chains and that focused expression I've come to love. When I asked what he was doing, he said, "Every proper porch needs a swing." He's been working on it for a few days now, and it's almost done. It's beautiful, crafted with the same care and attention he brings to everything he does. This morning, I woke up to find him already outside, putting the finishing touches on it. I made coffee and brought him a cup, and we tested it out together, swaying gently in the early morning light. "What do you think?" he asked. "It's perfect." "Good, because I was thinking." He paused, seeming nervous, which was unusual for him. "I was thinking maybe it's time to make this official. Me living here, I mean, if you want that." I looked at him, at this man who'd shown up with a toolbox and rebuilt more than just my porch. He'd rebuilt my faith in connection, in the possibility of finding someone who understood me. He'd created a space, both physical and emotional, where I could just be. "I want that," I said. He kissed me then, soft and sweet, and we sat on the swing he'd built, on the porch he'd repaired, and watched our street wake up. The oak trees filtered the morning light into patterns of gold and green. Somewhere down the street, someone was brewing coffee. A dog barked. Life continued its small-town rhythm around us. I never expected to fall in love with a carpenter who fixed my porch for free, but that's exactly what happened. And I'm grateful every single day for rotting wood and a kind landlord and a man who saw beauty in creating something lasting. Daniel didn't just fix my porch, he gave me back my favorite place in the world, and then he stayed to share it with me. Every evening when we sit out here together, I'm reminded that sometimes the best things in life come from the simplest acts of kindness, from someone who sees a problem and decides to fix it, who sees you and decides you're worth the effort. The porch is just wood and nails, but what it represents is everything. It's a foundation. It's a beginning. It's a place where two people can sit together and just be, watching the world go by, building a life one quiet evening at a time. Total char count, 24,847.